So this is a primer video on the prayer of pleading and serenity. This is a prayer we can use anytime that things are just feeling really rough. We're feeling intense bodily pain, we're feeling intense emotional or psychological upheaval. Things just feel like they're overwhelming or so underwhelming we don't feel like there's anything even to rise to meet in life. In other words, when things seem out of sorts, or really when we're at our wits' end, we're really struggling and suffering, and all we really want to do essentially is to beg or plead in a certain way for healing, for mercy, for relief. And I want to acknowledge, one thing we do at the beginning is we can just beg and plead. We don't need to couple it into some kind of high-minded technique or something like that. In fact, I think when we really do allow ourselves to go into those rawer states of expressing our desire and our want to feel better, to be better, there's an honesty in that. And really a rawness and a surrender and a deep humility inside of that is precious and beautiful of its own. And so I want to encourage doing that too. This is something that can be done when you're looking to balance that, what I just described, with some kind of more meditative awareness, because I know that what happens to me is when I tend to go into the kind of full raw surrender, it like works well for a while, but then at some point my mind kind of takes over and I get into I don't know, I'll kind of go into laundry lists of complaining, or I'll do things like that. I'll start taking tangents, and then I kind of feel lost. I don't feel like I'm in my zone anymore, where I'm really expressing rawly from my heart. And sometimes I feel worse than when I started, or I feel disoriented. And so sometimes having a way to kind of ground ourselves, almost kind of like in jazz, right? If this is kind of the flute that can go wandering off in different improvisational directions, you've always got that bass line playing behind, which kind of gives you a structure to come back to whenever that flute gets tired of its flying or wants to kind of reconnect to the core of the song. And so that's what this second part that I'm going to talk about is. You could think of kind of like the bass line to go with that flute. When you're in the rawness of your begging and your pleading for mercy, this is something you can do to kind of keep your mind and your heart in balance so you don't feel too tipped, too off kilter, or too off the line with what you're doing. So the technique is we do our begging, we do our pleading, and then we alternate that with a statement. And the statement, I'm just looking down at my notes here again to make sure I get it right. Thank you for exactly what happens. Exactly what happens is best. Thank you for exactly what happens. Exactly what happens is best. Now there's alterations on this we can do. Thank you for exactly what's happening. Exactly what's happening is best. I think that phrasing tends to bring it a little more into the present, what's happening, right, as opposed to kind of what happens. There's another meditation I have where I say something like, this moment is exactly as it should be. This moment is exactly as it should be. The wording itself isn't so important as an acknowledgement, again, for the purposes of this technique, that everything is perfect, nothing needs to change. Because I think sometimes what happens is we get into that begging and that pleading mode. We are saying from our hearts, from the bottom of our hearts, with every fiber of our intention, that we want something to be different than it is. And that's usually something internally within us, right? Some pain or agitation we're having in our mind or our heart or in our body, right? Some kind of looping we tend to get into. And again, it will be externalized, right? Sometimes it manifests in abusive relationships, in chemical or behavioral addictions, unhealthy attitudes toward politics, social issues, things like that. Ultimately, though, it's my belief that those all really are just kind of mirrors, right, almost holograms, reflecting an internal conflict or struggle. And the reason those things are showing up in our external life is to kind of signal to us on a deep level, hey, there's something inside that's asking to be healed. There's something inside that's asking to be resolved. And if we just keep kind of swinging our sword in the outside world, we never actually get to the root underneath it. All those little moles will keep popping up in our external life. We'll keep whacking them. And the internal issue that's actually generating that never actually gets addressed. And so when we beg and we plead and we acknowledge, hey, look, there's something in me that just feels, feels like an extreme tension. I know, I get it. I feel this intense, almost feels like a hot electric wire is like wrapped around my ribs. Kind of like around my sternum area here, and it like vibrates, it's hot, so there's a physical sensation that hurts. It tends to coincide with what I call kind of a mind venom, or a distortion of my thinking, and it tends to go into very predictive patterns of paranoia, conflict, blaming, things like that. And I get in those states and I'm trying my techniques, I'm regrounding myself, I'm breathing, I'm doing all the things that I know are wise, and it feels like nothing's working. Sometimes it almost feels like it's almost backfiring. And this is when I say I resort to begging and pleading. It really feels like I just kind of do it out of desperation. And when I'm begging and pleading, I'm asking, right, please heal this pain, please end this delusion, like please bring me peace, right? Or maybe I don't need that much of description. I'm just like, please, right? Or I'm cussing, right? I don't cuss here, but F this, S that, this is ridiculous. What, like, please, God, like, just everything I have as rawly as I can. When I complement that with the acknowledgement statement of this moment is exactly as it should be, right? Exactly what's happening is best. Thank you for exactly what's happening, right? Some variation on that. What I think that tends to do, I've drawn my graph here. In other videos, I go into this in a lot more detail. I'll give a very condensed version here. This is essentially my map of what I think existence is. O represents a state of oneness, right? All pervasive. I've drawn a line around it here, but that's actually misleading. This is oneness. Everything that's occurring is oneness. Even God is an expression out of oneness, right? Spirit is kind of a subdivision of God. And then I, which is the perspective of an organic being, is a subdivision essentially of a spirit. I don't love that word subdivision, but I'm just kind of going with it. And so when I'm in this perspective here, notice I'm focusing on my own pain, on my own struggling. I'm highly identified with this position, right? Which is a good thing. We want to be fully identified with our positions, but the key is we don't want to be exclusively identified with a position. I don't want to think of myself as just this being, right? I think that's actually a major cause of suffering. In Buddhism, they have the three kleshas, which is the three roots of suffering, and ignorance or delusion is the primary one. And I think there's a lot of different ways to express that or to explore it. But I think a key one is mistaking ourselves for being exclusively organisms. Yes, we are definitely entirely organisms, but we are not exclusively organisms, right? This is my belief. And so when I'm getting into these extreme states, which I could call in a judgmental way self-pity, really is like a raw expression of a desire for things to be different. I think that's at least in part an indicator to myself that I'm fixating on my organic perspective, fixating on my energetic experience, and not appreciating the truths that emerge on these higher levels. Again, in other videos, I go into more detail on that. I keep saying that, like other videos, to try to stop myself from going on a tangent, because oftentimes once I get started on this, like 20 minutes later, I'll come back and go, yeah, what was I talking about? Suffice it to say, my belief is on the level of spirit, on the level of God, on the level of oneness, we can't really take seriously the notion of ourselves as a victim, right? As someone as things are just happening to, because we realize on this higher level that we and actually everything else together are co-creating this experience. And we're not co-creating it as a form of torture, or even in my view, as a form of like a test or a trial. It's actually an unconditionally loving creation all the time, done from a position of omnipotence. Get my omnis here, my omnipotence, omniscience, and omni-loving, right? In other words, we know everything from this creative position. We have complete creative power, right? It's not like a hand's tied behind our back. And we're loving. We're not doing lab rat experiments or seeing ourselves as something expendable thrown away. We love ourselves more than we possibly could imagine. And what's crazy is this gap, right? Being in the midst of this experience, right? Begging, right? And I'll be real. This is where sometimes active or passive suicidal ideation can come in. Thoughts of self-harm can kind of come in here. I'm not in any way advocating those things. What I'm saying, though, is in this zone where we're so highly identified, not just with our sense of ourselves as being an organism, but with the current energetic, psychological, emotional, sensational state of our body and being, without an appreciation for this larger context in which we arise, that's where it's really easy to coil in on ourselves and to get into these extreme negative states, which is where I think that self-harm really starts to come from, because out of desperation and sometimes some inner self-deception, we start to think that that's actually a loving path for ourselves, a loving choice to make. I think when we're uttering those statements, for example, that exactly what happens is best. Thank you for exactly what's happening. What we're doing is we're acknowledging our existence on this level as well, right? So the pleading, right? Please end my pain. Please end my suffering. Please end this psychological torment. Please end this sensation of a wire feeling wrapped around my ribs, right? I can say that with the full force of my being and mean it from my bones. And then I can say that other statement, right? Thank you for exactly what's happening. Exactly what's happening is best. And just saying it, right? I try to say it with as much meaning as I can, but especially when I'm really soaked into this, that's hard. Just acknowledging it, I think, is a bit of a glimmer, right? A bit of an acknowledgement can pull me out of this tar pit a little bit and help me just remember that there's more to this story than what I'm thinking when I'm down here, right? And it's not like I need to figure out what the story is. I don't need to even have this metacosmology or whatever other metacosmology we may have in mind. That's not really the point. The point is really more about recognizing, hey, look, here's how I am and how I feel. Here's what I believe, right? Now I'm speaking for me personally. Here's what I believe is a larger truth. And so I want to honor both of these truths simultaneously, not pitting them against each other, not trying to say this is good or this is bad or vice versa. Just acknowledging, right? Kind of like the Walt Whitman quote, right? Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself, right? I'm large, I contain multitudes, right? We are large, we do contain multitudes. This state of being is a state of feeling of extreme smallness, extreme powerlessness, extreme like singularity. I am pain, I am suffering, right? And one of the things I think we want to acknowledge, if you're buying in with me on this, or you're at least kind of following along, it's like, yeah, and we are creating that mysteriously from a position of pure love and pure power. We are deciding, right, in that moment. It's not like we chose it long ago and now we're watching this unfortunate little episode unfold during what is largely a good thing. We are choosing in this moment to have this experience exactly as it is, in all of its misery, right, in all of its internal squalor. We're choosing that. That is utterly unbelievable to me in this state of mind. It feels like an insult. It feels, God, almost like a threat or something like that. And again, that's a reflection of where I'm at. This is a statement essentially of faith. This is a statement of deep affirmation. And it's not to try to get me to stop crying, to stop begging, or even necessarily to get me to stop feeling pain right now, because I'm acknowledging that the pain I'm feeling in that moment is perfect. It's really just more trying to help to break the spell and the enchantment of this kind of swirling the sink of my own misery, to remember there's another truth out there. And to remember that I really am choosing and creating this. And that doesn't mean I need to wipe my tears and get up and go for a jog or do something better. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but just in the act of acknowledging it, just in acknowledging the gap, and acknowledging that right now in my mental state, I can't make this leap. Right? When I'm feeling good, right, when I'm flowing, this gap seems smaller to me. I'm like, I could kind of see that. I could kind of get how this would be from a state of almost paradise, why I would choose to still incarnate this way and feel this way, right? Got the ocean breeze in my face, a cold beer in my hand, my loved ones nearby, nice music playing, right? This starts to feel kind of like heaven. This gap starts to get smaller. Well, does the state of reality change just because I'm feeling utterly miserable? Ultimately, no, but subjectively, deep within the pain, yes, it's a different world, it's a different universe, right? It's essentially, I believe, hell that we're experiencing. And what blows my mind is that we're not just experiencing it as some kind of victim, we are actually experiencing it as a creator who is choosing in the midst of its creation to forget that it is creating it and to essentially surrender itself into the rawness of this experience. And in that moment, giving itself the freedom to remember a truth, which again, in some ways will seem like an addition to the torment, because it's like, whoa, you're telling me that not only am I miserable and awful and maybe don't even want to exist right now, but now you're actually turning me into my own abuser by telling me that I'm doing this, right? We don't need to get into an argument. I don't need to get into a back and forth, right? That's not really kind to ourselves in that moment. The technique is to alternate, right? And we don't have to alternate strictly and it has to be one and one. Right? We can go like this for a while, and then when this just feels burned out or it feels like it's getting off track, re-anchor with the thought of the higher truth. And then let it be. and then go back into this. And if there's rage that comes from that, indignation, disbelief, that makes us want to puke, that makes us want to scream, makes us want to shake. What I find is when we have this to go back to, there can be more courage and more surrender here, because I know I'm not going to abandon myself into the self spiral, right? Into the spiral of negativity. This is kind of my anchor, right? This is kind of like if I'm diving under the water and I got my buoy up at the surface, which is what I can return to, my point of safety, right? This is kind of like that buoy. And I think it actually can allow us to experience this state with more intimacy and more surrender, knowing that we have that truth to return to, which again, it's not going to make us feel better always, right? It's not always going to return us to some divine, pristine, serene state. It just has a way of breaking the trance again, opening the doors a little bit, opening the windows to let it breeze through, and allowing us to remember a higher truth. And even if you don't believe in God, right? I've believed in God now for maybe the last 3 years. I did when I was younger, and from maybe around the age 13 to about 36. I just didn't believe at all. And again, you don't need God or any conception of that to use this technique. This technique, though, is really about just anchoring the experience and then the thought, right? The thought of surrender, that this is exactly as it should be. This moment is exactly as it should be, right? And we can use an expression of gratitude. That's faith. It doesn't have to be faith in a particular belief system, right? Or a certain notion of things. At its rawest level, faith is simply just an acknowledgement. And when we can make that acknowledgement, even when it doesn't feel true to us, even when our mind is thinking that it's actively untrue, right, and it's almost offensive to assert it as true, that's actually kind of the subtle indicator that it's a right time to go into faith. And use faith as that way to kind of balance yourself. Use faith as that way to kind of keep yourself sane, really, and have a foot on reality as we go into the deep deception and delusion that underlies this state. And what I think you'll find is almost kind of like a muscle that you train too. The more that you incorporate those faith thoughts into your misery experience, the more then that they'll naturally and kind of organically arise, and they can just provide you breaks, right? Beautiful, graceful breaks from the terrible kind of coiling monotony that this experience can be sometimes. And just that little break, just like a little breath, a little beat to kind of break the trance that this thing will try to create with all its negativity, almost like a disposal unit that just wants to shove our entire life into that box. That glimmer of faith, like almost like a faith, like a star gleaming in the sky, just to remind us, right? It's not all dark, it's not all black. There's more to this than I'm aware of right now. I don't need to force it down my throat, right? I don't need to believe, cringe, cling, hang to belief, right? It's not what it's about. It's just about counteracting this spiral with the glimmer of that star.